Brazilian spiritist, is an associate professor at the Department of Chemistry at York College, CUNY, and a full-time researcher at the Rockefeller University in New York City. He holds several academic degrees and is a lecturer for both the physical sciences and the Spiritist doctrine. Introduced to Spiritism at the age of 15, Julio is particularly interested in studying the solid logical foundation upon which the Spiritist concepts are built, as well as in creating a tighter association among those very same concepts. Beyond that, as we like to say, he's a friend, he's someone just like us who struggles to be a good and kind person, and we are very happy to bring him here tonight because, as we said last week, right, announcing him, Julie's one of those individuals that when he sits next to us, when he's around, he makes us think. When we get to that point that we think that we know this or we know that, he comes along and think again. And tonight he will bring this amazing talk about spiritual interaction. Julio, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and also good evening to the brothers and sisters from the spiritual realm, and also our mentors. I cannot see you. I cannot see them, to let you know, so don't get scared from this introduction, but we have to acknowledge them. And I always acknowledge them at the end because I know that they're not going to mind as much as we do. Okay, so my idea is, as Leo kindly said it in the introduction, is to work on certain concepts of the Spiritist doctrine, and in particular, certain concepts about the interactions. And today we're going to be discussing the perispiritual interactions. I try to study it and try to establish a communication with all the books, an interaction or an association with all the concepts from the 5 books of the codification, so that we can have a clearer view of our life here on planet Earth, our life here on the physical plane, so that one day when we finally have to return, we'll understand better the other side as well, hopefully. So today, we'll be discussing perispiritual interactions, and the very first thing that we are going to do is make a definition of the terms. So before anything, let me tell you one thing. Every now and again, we are going to have a screen like this one, blank. Don't panic. That means you should be looking at me and only at me. All right? It's my way of saying I want the spotlight completely. Every now and again, we'll put some slides. Actually, there are very few slides for this presentation in particular. So don't panic. If it's not like that, you can turn your heads this way, right? So the first thing we have to do is define our terms. If we don't define our terms, then you don't know what I'm saying, or you might think you know, and we don't get to the end of the lecture with some sort of understanding. It's one thing when you say to me, I don't agree with you, but I understood the terms of what you were saying. The other thing is when you say, I couldn't understand anything because I don't know what you were talking about in the first place. I couldn't understand the terms that you were using. So the very first thing that we're going to do is define a few terms and define a few basic concepts that we're going to be using. And the first thing is that whenever I speak of interactions, first and foremost, this is a Spiritist center. So here we are going to give a focus, an emphasis on spiritualistic and Spiritist concepts. If we studied this someplace else in a different way, with a different connotation, it is also valid, but it's not what we want to address here. Here we want to address, especially when we speak of the word interactions, we want to address that word in the Spiritist context. So let us start with a few points. You probably have seen this from a previous lecture. We have the creation. It's this big blue box here. And then we divide this creation into a few parts. We divide into a quintessential part, which is non-material and non-physical. I have no words for it more than that, other than those two, non-material, non-physical. We don't have anything to do. We can't do any experiments with this part in the sense that our science cannot grasp anything from this part because there is no matter there. It's non-material, non-physical, no energy either. So we have no idea what to do with this part. Everything that we do with this part here comes to us from our interactions with the spirits in their communications, but even our understanding of this part is very limited because our language itself is material. Our language itself is physical. So we are going to see that this part here is the one that we know about the least. Then we have the other part of the creation, which we call the material part, and that is defined by the universal fluid here. So there is a dividing line here between the non-material and everything that is material. But we were not satisfied with that. We had to make it even a little more complicated. And we took the material part of the creation and we divided into two pieces, material and physical. I could have called this A and B, yes and no, anything you want. But since this is the material part, both sides have to be material. But for this side to be divided away from this one, it has to be something slightly different than this. So we call this material and physical, or you can just say physical for short. But whenever you say physical for short, remember it's material and physical, whereas this one here is material only. And now you understand why we divide them all like that. The creation itself is not divided in those three parts. The creation itself is not divided into those three parts. The creation is one. It's the blue box here. We are the ones, and the spirits, because the spirits are nothing more than ourselves without a physical body, right? The spirits and we put these three divisions together because it allows us to break a very complex problem into smaller parts and then look at the problems, at the pieces first, and later try to put those pieces together to see if we can compose the whole. This is called breaking it apart, okay, analyzing, and then we put everything back together, synthesizing. And if we do this correctly, we get a whole idea, a very good picture of what the creation is. Let me give you an example. You have a blender at home. You are 15 years old, very curious. I will not say who actually did that. I will not name, myself. Oops. You have that blender and you decide to understand how the blender works. And then, for the chagrin of your parents, you take the only blender in the house and you take it apart. And you think you can put it back together. But when you finish putting it back together, there's that screw that is left on the side. And you think, what is it going to happen if we don't have that screw? But then everything stops working completely. So it's this idea. You take apart the blender, you take apart any piece of technology, any instrument, trying to figure out the bits and pieces to understand the whole. And then if you really had a good grasp of the little bits and pieces, as you reassemble, you get a very good understanding of what the whole thing used to do in the first place. So this is what we do with the creation. We divide into parts, and then we tackle each part individually. So now let us try to understand what we have in each one of those parts. The first thing here is the essence. That's us. All right? We are the essence. We are made of an essence. What is it? I don't know. Like I said on Thursday, okay, at Rockville, whenever you meet God, next time you meet God, ask it what the essence is. I don't know. And I've never heard of anyone who came back and said, oh, yes, I had a powwow with the Lord, and I know what the essence is. I know what I am, okay? But here's the most important thing. We are essences. We don't have one. We don't possess it. We are it. So that is not a property of ourselves. It is actually the whole of ourselves. The problem is that this essence has to interact with the material side of the creation. So this essence manifests itself on the universal on the universal fluid. There's no reason to say cosmic fluid or universal cosmic. If it's universal, it's cosmic. If it's cosmic, it's universal. So just universal fluid. So the essence manifests itself onto the universal fluid. When it does that, it creates what now we can say a body that belongs to us, that we have. And that body, so this should not even be here, but there is no other thing I can use, not physical. The perispirit, on the other hand, is material. And then we can say that we have a perispirit. I am an essence. Julio, the essence, has a perispirit with the name of spirit and not as essence. Well, it turns out spirit is actually the combination of what we are, essence, with what we have most immediately, our perispirit. So spirit is this whole thing here. And this is why, I don't know if you ever thought about it, this is why we call it the spiritual realm, even when the spiritual realm has a piece that is what? Material. Because the spirit itself is a material piece in it. The spirit is actually the perispirit and the essence together. Now, we can simplify, and we can have it like this. So instead of calling the essence, we can make a simplification and call this part here the spirit. But I want you to always be aware of this, and I've been actually doing this on almost every lecture that I've been given recently, because there are a few questions in the Spirit's book, in the Medium's book, that become very difficult for us to address if we don't remember that the spirit is the combination of essence and perispirit. This is very important for us to remember. Most of the time, yes, we can make this simplification here and call the essence the spirit. But remember, again, the spirit is actually the two together here. See this box that is encompassing both pieces here? So that is what we call really the spirit. Now, when we have something like that, you notice that there's nothing here on the physical side, material and physical. Well, that can change. We can actually have a physical body as well. And when we have a physical body, instead of being a spirit, an errant spirit, you see now that the box has grown to encompass the physical body as well? So now we are a reincarnated soul, a reincarnated spirit. Actually, that's the better way to say it. A reincarnated spirit. And now we are an essence. We have a perispirit, and we have a physical body. And then, here it is. Oh, sorry. Here we have it. Our physical body. All right? The physical body has a limited shelf life, a limited life. It is the physical body and only the physical body that dies. Only the physical body that dies. So when we go from this side here together to that side, we reincarnate. When the physical body dies, we come back here. So we are essence, perispirit together. We go back to the errant spirit state. Then we don't have a physical body anymore. And then we go through another physical body and another with every reincarnation process. So, the control is here in the essence. And it actually makes sense. Because the essence, not being material, not being physical, to our understanding, is not prone to degradation. So here, it's like this. It's like a database. Whenever I put something here, this database is always pristine, always new. It will never break. It will never fall into disrepair. So this is where we have our memories. This is where we store our experiences. This is where we store our emotions. This essence, as I mentioned to you before, manifests itself materially through its perispirit. And the perispirit does everything the essence imposes on it. So the perispirit itself is not an entity or a being. It doesn't have a will of its own. It is obeying what the essence is doing, because it's nothing more than the manifestation of that essence. A hand that writes is not the author of the book. The author of the book is the mind behind that hand. The person who plays the violin, plays the piano, the saxophone, the musician is the equivalence of the essence, not the instrument. The instrument is just a tool. So the perispirit is the tool, is the material tool of the essence. When we are an errant spirit, when we don't have a physical body, we are in this condition here, we're just an errant spirit, right? Our perispirit is under the control of the essence. This perispirit is what we use to communicate with another spirit, with another entity, with another sentient entity, an intelligent entity. When we are here in the physical realm, then we have a physical body. This physical body is put together by the perispirit. We don't have time today to address this, but the physical body is only as good as the perispirit that put it together, which in turn is only as good as the essence that actually created it in the first place. I will never be able to put together a perispirit that is better than what I am. And in the same way that the perispirit would never be able to put together a physical body that is better than the perispirit itself. But here's an interesting thing. When we are in the errant state, no physical body, we use the perispirit to interact with one another, spirit to spirit. But when we are in the physical realm, we have a physical body, you may think that your interactions are physical, but they are also happening at the perispiritual level. We can shake hands. It is your physical hand that feels the warmth or the coldness of my physical hand. But the exchange of emotions during that physical hand shake is here at the perispiritual level. So this is the other point that I want to make, that all these interactions that we have, the major ones, are actually happening at the perispiritual level. And these are happening in the spiritual realm because our perispirit is or belongs to the spiritual realm. I don't want to say is located, because it's really not like that, a geographical location. We'll just think of it this way. The perispirit belongs to the spiritual realm due to its constitution. Let us think of this way. The physical body belongs to the physical realm because of its constitution. But even the interactions at the physical body level are relayed and happen also through the perispirit. And this is what we want to study today. These interactions. By these interactions, I want to convey another important concept. We are going to be discussing interactions between two sentient species, two sentient beings, like I'm doing right now. I'm addressing you. You are paying attention to me, all right? I'm not addressing the chairs, I hope, or the walls, right? Because I cannot teach them, because they cannot learn. So interactions here is actually communications between two sentiences, two intelligences. I'm not talking to a dog, I'm not talking to a chair, I'm not talking to a piece of rock. This is important. This is the topic that we are going to be discussing here. So now that we have all of this together, all right, I want to convey another important topic just with this very simple slide. Imagine that that is our perispirit. And you see this little bubble around it? That is what we would call the psychosphere. It's not really a bubble, but it's the closest thing I could find to illustrate the point. And this comes particularly from the work, from the books, the psychology series of Joanna de Angelis. All right? The psychosphere, the whole point here is to create this impression that we have, for lack of a better word or expression, a field of energy around us. Honestly, I don't like that expression either, because nobody here is a physicist, or maybe there's one or another. But the point is, you start exchanging one empty expression for another, you never convey anything in the end. So let us think of something that is, it may be an oversimplification, but perhaps it's something we can all identify with. Imagine that around yourself, you have this bubble here, but instead of being a soap bubble, is an LCD screen. Or it's some form of a television. And that whatever you think, whatever you do, whatever you say, gets projected onto it. In the spiritual realm, you have no other choice. Once you think, do, or say something, it is displayed on that psychosphere for all of the other spirits to see. Right? And this is why we say, when we get to the spiritual realm, the mentors, the ones that vibrate at a higher level, all they have to do is just look at us, and pretty much like an adult looking to a very young child, right? We can tell, you're saying one thing, but you did another, right? We can figure it out because we have what? More experience. In the case of a higher order spirit, what we say is that they are more morally and intellectually evolved than we are. So they can read this psychosphere like that without a problem. We can read one another's psychosphere also very easily, and that is because we are roughly at the same level of advancement, both morally and intellectually. Okay, both moral and intellectual, sorry. But then we can do the same thing if we now approach a low-order spirit, someone who's less evolved morally or intellectually than we are. We can read their psychosphere, but they don't know how to read ours. So you understand this concept. So it's basically like a television, and some of us are capable of tuning to certain channels, and some of us are not able to tune to those channels. So it's like when you block certain channels from your TV or your cable TV, from your teenagers or from your children, right? So that would mean that you have more discernment power in that case. You would be the more morally evolved or intellectually evolved in that case, right? It's the same thing. We have this here. For the purposes of this talk, we are going to focus our interactions on between actually two or more spirits, but we are going to be looking at their perispiritual interactions and therefore at their psychospheres, but these spirits are all roughly at the same level. We're not going to be talking about our mentors, because then we only have to learn from them. We cannot assess or even access their psychosphere. And we are not going to put ourselves in such a pedestal that we're going to be talking about those below us. We've been there once, so we actually should help them and not feel ourselves superior. But what is most important is the ones that are, let us call it, horizontal interactions. In other words, those who are roughly at the same level we are, because those are the ones that can teach us. Really teach us. Because they don't only teach us, but they are also a test. So you not only get a lesson, but you're also getting the opportunity to test if you really understood the lesson. When we talk to a high order spirit, a mentor, all we get is the lesson, but we don't get the opportunity to test, because how are we going to test them? We can only test them if they are testing us at the same time. Now, they can test us, but we cannot test them, so we have no access to that. So the horizontal interactions, the horizontal very spiritual interactions are the most important, because these are people like us, or spirits like us, who are facing the same difficulties, even if they have slightly different circumstances. They are also facing the same troubles we are. So this is what we're going to be talking about. And now we are done with the slides. And for this, we're going to take a stroll. And I made sure that I was not wrong. We're going to be going to Inner Harbor, because you all know it. You're all from the area, right? If it were New York City, I would say, well, Fifth Avenue, perhaps Times Square. Times Square is too much. Fifth Avenue, let's not go that crazy. Okay, Inner Harbor is very nice, and let's see Inner Harbor in the middle of summer. So I was here in Baltimore a few years back when I had a conference, and at the end of the day, every single day we just go there and just stroll, and it was always packed. It was June, so it wasn't even summer yet. It was beginning of June, but you could see it was packed enough that you could go around and see other people. That is the picture that I want you to mentalize. You're at the Inner Harbor. You're just strolling there. You're not driving by, okay? It doesn't work if you're driving. Well, it will, but it's more difficult to describe. You're just walking, okay? And right now, you're walking alone. It's just a nice day, and you decide to go for a walk. That is what we're going to use. And I'm going to use this picture, this mental picture, and I want you to see how we can go from a single stroll all the way to an obsession, to a state of obsession, full obsession. But here is, I want to convey one important point. It's not that if you go to a park or to Inner Harbor or any touristic place or crowded place that you're necessarily going to be suffering or be prone to suffer a process of obsession. I'm just using this as an example. I'm just using this as something because you can relate to the place. This is very important for us to understand. What we're going to do is we're going to have the same walk many, many times. And each time we go there, I'm going to make it a little more complicated and a little more, dark in a way. Yes, that's correct. But a little more complicated and a little more intense. That's the idea. So we're going to start by going there alone. Nice day outside, have nothing else to worry about. And then you just walk by, you know no one. No one. Like me, when I came the first time, I didn't even know where Inner Harbor was or what it was. And then first day of the conference, I got there, I walked around, I didn't know anyone, right? So, are you interacting? Well, let me tell you this, I hope you were, or that you are right now. I was. Because you see, you may think that you're not interacting, but you actually are. I never said that the interaction had to be through the spoken word. I never said that you had to physically assault anyone, so they have like a physicality, some sort of an action. All I said was that there was some interaction, communication, some form of this relationship between two sentiences, right, or more. We're always going to use two because it's easier, but it can be two or more. You have to have at least another person. Well, it is, because, for instance, if you go there in the middle of the day when everybody can see you, I hope that you're fully dressed, because otherwise that would be probably not just a small misdemeanor, but something a little more serious than that, right? So you are aware of where you are. And because you are aware of where you are thinking of the other people, even though you don't know them, you don't have their names, you have never associated with them, you have never spoken to them. You are interacting with them at a very, 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 very small level. You are fully clothed, or you are clothed for the occasion. If it's a hot day, you can, it may be wear shorts and short sleeves and things like that. But you are aware of their existence. And that is a very, very narrow type of interaction, but it's an interaction nevertheless. And yet, you never spoken to anyone. You never shook hands with anyone, but you are fully aware that they are there. As you move along, as you move there, as you move by, okay, your perispirit is grazing on the psychosphere of every perispirit that comes into contact with you. And here's an interesting thing. Physically, as your physical body is strolling, okay, down Inner Harbor, right, you have to actually bump on someone to have a physical interaction now. But your perispirit, the psychospheres, they don't have to be physically next to one another. The fact that you are there, all of those individuals there are also in some form of very low-level interaction with your own psychosphere, the psychosphere of your perispirit. Okay? Now, imagine that you're going by. That's another example. We're going to add a notch to it. Okay? Follow me. You're following me? We're going to go get there again, but I'm going to add a little thing to it. As you're strolling, someone calls you, but not by name. Sir, madam, they are asking for directions. They don't know where they're going. Perhaps they want to go to a special place to eat. Perhaps they want to go to another historical place nearby. They stop you. So it's usually the hey or madam, sir, excuse me, whatever it is, whatever interjection we use to catch or to call someone's attention. Are you interacting with this person now or this group? It doesn't matter if it's one person or a group. Again, we're just going to use two, you and somebody else. That's easier. So yes, and in this case, you don't have any hesitation because now you talk to or they talk to you at least first, right? But you are now interacting at a much higher level because now you have been called from all of those psychospheres there. Yours has been selected out. Yet, it's just to ask for directions. But it's still an interaction. But it's now already at a higher level than the previous one. They're still, both of them, very low level. But this is already a little higher than the previous one. Okay? Let's do another round. We're going to do this a few times, okay? Bear with me. Now, it is someone that knows you, that works with you here in Baltimore or nearby. So now this person not only calls your attention, but this person calls your name out. You are now being singled out, but now not only as one or any from the whole, but the one from the whole, because now the person calls out your name. Perhaps you have a name that is very common and they might not see it the first time, but it's not just the name. What is it that we normally use to know that we are being called? The person's tone of voice and the person's voice itself. We know it's a friendly voice, or at least an acquaintance's voice. So you turn around. And this is also an interaction. Now, one step slightly above from the previous one, which was just for a stranger to give directions, and even the first one, which was just the socialization, being in the presence of other intelligences. You see, we are building. So, in this case, the two psychospheres approach one another, all right? There is the interaction of the dialogue, and then they pull apart a little bit, and the only thing that remains is the interaction of that individual being there like you are. And if that individual leaves Inner Harbor completely, moves away, you see the person departing, then even that psychosphere is so far away now that you are not concerned with it anymore. You may still be able to interact with that person if you keep thinking about that. Oh, such a nice individual just moved into my office, just started working. We share a few things in common. Maybe one of these days, I will invite that person to go watch a movie with me. So if the person is no longer there physically, but you now think about that individual, your psychospheres are still connected. Because like I said, the psychospheres are in the spiritual realm. They don't have to have the physicality, the connectivity that is here, that you observe here in the physical realm. All right. So now, let's give it another turn, another go. You meet the same person that you met before. But now, you invite this individual to go and watch a movie. You say, well, this person is new to the area. I remember when I moved in, it was difficult for me. I came here, I was alone. So I don't know what the situation is with this person. Let me, invite this person over. We can go watch a movie. I've heard from the office, a small conversation that he or she likes movies. So you go there. And this is now more of a little bit of an acquaintance. It's not just someone you've seen or even seen in the office. You start building this relationship up. And you move further and further into it. You may go to a movie theater. You're going to enjoy or not enjoy that movie. And it doesn't matter what your tastes are, provided that you enjoy the same type of activity. When you do that, your psychospheres begin to touch. Let's say, let's use a physical analogy here, because that's what we have, right? We live in the physical realm. It's as if these psychospheres are really close to one another and almost like interpenetrating one another, because you're making a stronger and stronger bond. Good? So now we're going to use this same individual and move it a little further. You see this person today, and then you decide, every Wednesday is movie night. I don't know, or every Friday is movie night. You're going to decide on a day. And you start developing a relationship with this individual, a friendship, one of friends, right? These psychospheres become more and more, linked. Now, even when you are not in the presence of one another, the physical presence of one another, you think of one another. You may be at home and you're cooking something. Oh, I know that individual likes this. Or you watch something on TV, or you do some other activities. Oh, this person would have enjoyed it. So this interaction becomes tighter and tighter as time goes by. Okay? And as you develop more and more things alike, more and more things that you both enjoy sharing as friends. Now, let us look at 3 more only. Okay? I don't want to bother you too much. But now here's the part that is interesting for us. So you notice that perispiritual interactions, I'm just going to make a tiny summary here so that this can prepare us for the next 3. Right now, what we said was the perispiritual interactions are not time-dependent, not physicality-dependent. Even when I think about a friend or an acquaintance, I am in some ways linked to that perispirit through our psychospheres. That this interpenetration, this intensity with which one psychosphere interacts with the other is dependent on what we share. We have to share. Keep this word in your minds. Sharing. Sharing is the most important thing here. There is no way we are interacting, our psychospheres are interacting with someone who's in another side of the globe that we never knew of, that we never seen, we never had any sensorial contact with, right? And even someone that's right outside here, if I've never seen this person before, if I've never asked this person's name, I have no relation, so maybe right here, physically speaking, right next to me, and I'll have very, very, very little, of a perispiritual interaction, or almost none at all. Like the first time when you're just strolling by, and you knew no one, and nobody called your name or anything. But the point here is, the more you share with someone, the more intense this interaction becomes. Okay, I said 3. It's actually 4. I'm sorry. I tricked you. All right. So now this individual says, okay, Wednesdays are movie nights. Let's do Wednesdays and Thursdays. You don't want to do it on Thursdays. Actually, let me rephrase it. It's Wednesdays and Saturdays, and here's why. Because on Saturdays you come here to the Spirit Center. You want to hear the lectures. You want to participate in the studies. So you don't want that on Saturday. You're already going out with that person. So you see that individual, and now this person starts to ask you, let's go out on Saturday as well. Let's go out on Saturday as well. And eventually you give in to peer pressure. You either feel sorry for the person because, oh, the person is lonely. I remember when I moved into the city many years ago, I didn't have family or this or that or friends in the area. So you then miss a lecture at the center. You miss a study session at the center. Do you know what we call that? Now, it's what we call a destructive influence. Now, destructive influence is not something that can, raise a city to the ground. A destructive influence is not a tsunami, but it can be something that takes you away from your routine, a routine or whatever it is that you want to do that is usually more constructive than the thing you end up choosing to do instead. It's destructive. Or at least you should say non-constructive. So now when you leave the center, or when you leave whatever other thing you want to do that is more constructive to you, to go to a movie theater, when in principle you could have gone another day, or you had already gone that week, there was no need to go twice, right? Then that becomes now a spiritual influence. And in this particular case, we are going to address the negative side of it. But don't get me wrong. Let me tell you this. Imagine that you never did anything on Saturdays. That your Saturdays was just sitting at home, sprawled out on your couch, watching TV. Nothing against television, but you can do other things that are most constructive with your time. And imagine now that this same individual invites you to do some charitable work, or no, instead of sitting at home, let's go into the gym together. Because the thing is not the television, is the idleness. So in the same way that before I gave the example of the friend that wants to drive you away from the center, not because of anything with the center, just because the person wants to go to the movie. That is a destructive or non-constructive influence. Now you can have another individual that can actually have a constructive one. Sees that you are idle and takes you to do something constructive. So don't focus on a negative side only. I want to go towards the negative side because I want to show how we can get all the way to obsession. That's why. But the same form of influences can be very positive, right? We are interacting on a constant basis, and that's the message here. Whether it's interacting on a constant basis with only one individual or another, it doesn't matter. The point is that that psychosphere is never off. It's a TV that is 24/7. It is projecting what we are doing, and because of that, others can see and interact with us at any time, including those hours you are asleep. In other words, actually not you, but your physical body. So we have this influence, and if this influence is constructive, amazing. But you see what happens now if the influence is destructive? You may have someone that is now right next to you in the spiritual realm, at the psychosphere level, always interacting with you. Always interacting with you. So let us go back to that friend that wants to go to the movies twice a week, and the second time is actually on a Saturday. Well, you went once, maybe a second time. Now this individual does not understand your needs, or this particular need, this need specifically. And this individual gets a little more aggressive. Now this individual is not just trying to influence you to go someplace else or by invitation. This individual starts to pester you. This is now not just an influence anymore. There is something, and here is the key word, personal. It's personal now. This individual does not go to the movies with anybody else. You offer, you said, hey, why don't you invite person so-and-so from the office? That person also moved in recently. That person is also without friends in the area. Why don't you go on a Saturday with that individual? You try to establish a connection. Try to establish some friendship there. Nope. just with you. So now it's not about going to the movies anymore. And it's not about friendship anymore. Because if you are lonely and you want friendship, if you have somebody else that offers to go to a movie with you, you go. If you're from someone in the office, you know it's not a complete stranger. I understand that. We have to be somewhat careful. But we're not talking about that. In the example, I said someone from your office. You understand that individual. You know roughly, you know what the person works at least, right? You can even stop by HR and most likely figure out where the person lives if you are really that of a paranoid individual. But the point is, you have something in common at least to start a conversation. That is what I want to say. But if now you reject any other assistance or any other offer to go to a movie with someone, and I know it's an example that sounds silly, but it starts like that. This is also the other point that I want to make. It starts with something that is very simple. So now this individual wants you to go to the movie. This is no longer an invitation. This is no longer an impertinence of an invitation. So it's not now an invitation, a friendly one, and it's because it's impertinent. It's not. It's also. It's not even impertinent anymore. So it's not even what we would say bad influence. But now it's personal. It's an insistence that is beyond impertinence. That's the basic form of obsession. It's with you. It's personal. It's nobody else. Because like I said, if it were loneliness, you would go with somebody else. But you don't. That individual does not go with anyone else. And that now can go and get a little more complicated, more intense. So we have two to go. You reject the invitation once, twice, three times, and start getting upset. So now this person is very, very inopportune, is very impertinent, is very invasive. You have no privacy anymore. That person is now stopping you in the middle of your work during the office hours to invite you to go, and now the person goes up to you and say, "But why? Why don't you go with me? Why is it? What's the problem of going on Saturday?" So it's almost like someone is stalking you. Well, a form of obsession is a form of stalking someone. It is. So now that form of mild obsession becomes even more and more personal. And it becomes what we call a fascination. A stalker is nothing else than someone fascinated with somebody else, or with some attribute of that individual, or something that the person actually covets, that individual either has or is, and that the stalker himself or herself can either have or be. So now it's a fascination process. You went from someone that just nicely said hello to you the first time, and now you're being fascinated by that individual. But now here the word fascinated is not as in, in awe, but actually being obsessed, being perturbed. Your psychosphere and that individual's, okay, both psychospheres are linked together. And here is the last one. One day you're in the office, the person comes around, same person you met at Inner Harbor. After this one, no, I think nobody was going to go there, right? Please don't do that. It's a nice place, really. I really enjoyed it. And so now one day you're in the office, and this person comes in, and here's the problem. You lose your temper. You completely lose your temper. And you say some very harsh words to that person, such as, what's wrong with you? You're a loner. You can't have any other friends. So now the person perceives that, and here's the key point: the person perceives your attitude not as a venting or as a consequence of all that stalking, of all of that persecution, because it's a form of persecution, right? The person is completely blind to it. and sees it as you're being rude to him or her, as you're not being considerate. So now that personal behavior of the relationship gets even tighter. There is nothing tighter than this one. And that's the third stage of an obsessive process. And now this person goes berserk. You name it. I don't want to discuss the consequences. But you can understand. You can go all the way from simple defamation, saying bad things about you, harassing you everywhere you go, stalking you physically in the street, all the way to a crime. That's your subjugation stage. That's the last step. All right? Now, you remember all the stages, all the walks we did, everything that happened? So now I ask you one thing. What was common? Of course, the two individuals, all right? But what was common to all of these situations where that we can actually make one grow all the way into the last form of an obsession process? The affinity, exactly. The affinity, which I would call actually, a handshake. So this handshake is what we have when we have situations like this one. Accusations, intemperance during our, life here on the physical realm. And even when we are errant spirits, we can actually have obsessing spirits, one spirit obsessing another, both as errant spirits. Obsession is not discarnate with incarnates. Okay, it's just, or discarnates with reincarnates. It's with reincarnates and reincarnates, discarnates and discarnates, and discarnates and reincarnates. It's all three processes. So when we are in a state of accusation, we start accusing people. When we lose our attempt, the idea of the other side is always greener. But because it's envy, you project negative thoughts towards the other individual, who then becomes despondent. You can also have a situation, just general disharmony. I hate that person. I don't know why. But the person just moved in, just started working in the office. I don't know why, but I just hate that person. Okay, but then you do nothing to get rid of that thought. So it's a generalized disharmony. Negative influences. This is what we have is the Schadenfreude, which is the German word that means literally, broken or damned in a miserable state, right? These are negative influences, and you're two linked. You can be both reincarnated beings, one reincarnated and the other one discarnate, or the other way around, and also be both discarnate beings. Because the point is, all of us, reincarnated or not, we have a perispirit. And if we have a perispirit, we can do perispiritual interactions because we have our psychospheres. So, if you have that, and now these are my favorites, because these go under most people's radars. Nobody talks about these things these days. It's almost like a taboo, I don't know why, or maybe because everybody knows they are guilty of them, then we don't talk. Omissions. When you see something, you see something, you hear something, all right, or you say something you should not have done, or that you could have done, and you don't do it in the first place. Okay? The omissions. The other one, this one. Okay, I had to put a third person there, right? Our indifference. Look, this is what we call the trust fall exercise in psychiatry, right? In psychology. And then, the person is trusting that the other two are going to pick him or her up. And look what they're doing. Cell phones, iPads, and all the other pads and computers. In other words, they couldn't care less about the moment. This is why I had to introduce a third one there, just to give the point. But indifference, we can be quite a lot. Indifference and omission, they always go hand in hand. We also have, then when we have all these situations, we're always going to have this. affinity. These are now the representations I want to convey to you. These are the representations now of our perispirits. And they are doing what? A handshake. All perispiritual interactions only happen if there is a handshake. Without a handshake, they will not happen. If you want to give me an influence that is negative, and I am above it, I may feel the first blow. I may get it. And then I realize, oh my goodness, that person thinks very badly of me. That person doesn't really like me. If you step away from it, spiritually speaking, you do not harbor mechanisms or thoughts. You don't harbor thoughts, and you do not develop mechanisms of revenge. You detach. You break the handshake. And by breaking the handshake, you break that affinity. You move yourself slightly above. You're not a high order spirit. You're not even a mentor. But you already detach yourself enough to break the handshake. Perispiritual interactions are all based on mutual agreement. Which means that if you let that individual perturb you that much, that individual that because of a movie, going to the movie theater, ended up stalking you, it's because in a way, in some insidious, perturbing way, you kind of liked being stalked. There was something there that was a very disturbing behavior. And we all do this with one thing or another in our lives. What I want to convey is that you must break the handshake. And that's in your power. Because without the handshake, the other spirit can still make your life miserable, but not you miserable. That person may make things difficult for you in the office, may say bad things to you in the office, may use defamation, or may be following you, but you don't care. You live your life. Or that individual may, for instance, never speak to you again. And then you say to yourself, well, I can make friends with other people. All right? I can find others, I can find friends in other parts. So the handshake is the key here. Because every time, especially when we study obsession, what we see is always we say, obsessor, obsessed. Well, we have to have some words, unfortunately. But we must understand this. It's a handshake. Both obsessor and obsessed are linked. And all forms of subjugation, the most abhorrent form of obsession, the third level of obsession, they all started with something as silly as someone denying a small request, such as going to the movie on a particular day. If you can follow the spirits when you do, for instance, work at adopt disobsession at a mediumistic meeting, and you start prying the spirits for information and prying and gently going, and you see that they are now giving you the information. It can take years. This is not something that happens in one session. You will see that in every form of hard, intense, obsessive phenomenon, you will find something so silly that you would not, at the end you will say, oh my God, you two are linked like this in this misery for like 300 years because of that? Well, you can't say that, of course. As the therapist there, because you are acting as one, you should never say such a thing. But you have to make sure that the person understands it on his or her own. And it's always like that. And just so you don't think that we are talking about things that are only in the spiritual realm or between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. Remember, this is what our spirits are doing. They are handshaking, right? They are interacting. But we have to be very careful. We have things that start also here on this planet. in very small ways, and sometimes even ways that we might not even realize very well. Okay? When we pass certain types of judgment in our lives, we start something like this. Sometimes we hound people because of tiny little mistakes that they make. And yet, in hounding them for a tiny little mistake, we become blind to all the good that they do. To all the good that they do. So, for instance, someone takes care of your house, someone takes care of your lawn, your garden. And then you come in one day and the person mowed the grass and cut and everything, put it in a bag, but forgot to take the bag and put it outside. So for it to be collected, right, and disposed of properly. So you have all that grass in that plastic bag, and then you, well, pardon the expression, you blow a fuse. You know, you hit the roof. And for what? It's a tiny little thing. You forget all of the good that was done. When we are in the office, is that person that picks on tiny little things that you do in the office, right? Or, you know, in the Spirit Center, we have to be even more aware of these things. Whether we are the coordinators, where we are the lecturers, where we are in the audience, it doesn't really matter. Because the influences that are happening here are tremendous. We are under the influence 100% of our time. That includes even our sleep time. When we are asleep, we are still being influenced. And we have to be very careful because it starts with an influence. Because, for instance, they may not hate me in particular or any one of you, but they may dislike the fact that you all get together here to improve yourselves. So they're going to attack me, so I cannot give a lecture. I cannot come here. Or they will attack you and go at you to make you asleep when you're watching the lecture, or to make you deny everything that you're listening because you don't even give yourself the chance to listen to the whole sentence before you already make a judgment, you pass judgment. All right? We have so many different forms of interaction, ways that they have. Sometimes tiny little things that happen in our daily lives. So you have a colleague, you have a friend, and then you see a person one day, right? Person goes, for instance, to a dinner, and goes to a dinner at sports bar. And you say, oh my God, you went to a sports bar? Oh, that noise. It's so loud, it's so dark. You go to a Spirit Center. That's a form of a very negative influence. Those tiny little things that we say. Because were you there every single day to watch if that person was going there as a habit? And I'm sorry to say, but if you were, perhaps you would have the right to say it, but then I would say to you, but then you are guilty of something that is much worse. Idleness, because you're not using your time wisely. Your time, my time here is not to invigilate and pass judgment and supervise and surveillance and provide surveillance on other people. Okay? It's actually to what? Take care of myself, improve myself, both morally and intellectually. No, it happens. It happens. We do this. If someone goes to it's a wedding reception and the person toasts and has a drink, and it's alcoholic, it's like the end of the world. The person didn't fall on the floor, flat, drunk. And even if it had, then this is the time where you should talk to that individual and say, what happened there, my friend? But in private, not in front of other people, all right? Is everything okay with you? And not pass judgment or start proselytizing about it. That's the last, because if the person is truly an alcoholic, that's the last thing you need the person to tell you. Put their finger in your face and start sermonizing, all right? You want help, assistance, a hug, all right? All of these influences are perispiritual interactions. They are all with us at all times. And they are because we have that handshake. So we have to be very careful. Keep the handshake with those influences that are truly good. Why did I say truly good? Because sometimes we get influences that we like, simply because they fulfill our egos. So I said to you, truly good are the ones that fulfill our needs, not our wants. Our needs are the things that we require for our progress here on earth. They can bring us joy as well. Don't think that needs are only the things that are basal or that will never give you us any joy, like they're bland and tepid. No, they can actually provide a lot of happiness to us. All right? But it's needs, not our wants. Because our wants are based on our egos, and they usually are the reason for many of our falls. So the handshake, we can keep the handshake. But with those interactions, those attachments or connections that we make with somebody else's psychospheres that are productive to us. And only those. And be careful with everything else. Because like we had in our example, a tiny little invitation, a very innocent invitation, may lead us to very dire consequences. Of course, not overnight, but you understand what I meant with it. You get the idea that things evolve and always evolve because we let them for the worst. But we have, it's in our power. As it said before, it is in our power to change that. I just want to say one thing at the very end that I said yesterday, but because of what was said today, at the beginning, so Joana de Angelis said that we have this knowledge, right? That we learn it. It's our own, correct? Well, remember that, yes, our progress is individual. I cannot progress for you. You cannot progress for me. I cannot become more morally evolved or intellectually evolved for any one of you, and neither can you for me. But we learn together. So do not see the handshake as only things that are bad. Do the handshake, but do the handshakes that will actually bring you knowledge, that will bring you opportunities for growth. I'd like to thank everyone for the invitation. I'm open to questions.
Thank you again, Julio, for this amazing presentation, this reminder. And I would like to second on what you just said, because sometimes in many instances, in many cases, we have come in contact with brothers and sisters who understand a little bit this interaction. And because we understand a little bit, and because we know that can be detrimental, we kind of take a step back. And we truly stop the handshakes, the new connections. If we don't do, if we stop with others, we tend to internalize and only maintain those connections. And we stop from liberating ourselves and growing, because we don't want to do more handshakes, because we're afraid. Because we're afraid the obsession. That from the tiniest one, as Julio said, to the subjugations, the really ones. So thank you for that reminder. It's important for all of us and for us to put into practice. As Julio mentioned, we do have some moment for some questions. So please, if you would like to ask a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you, and we'll be able to get him to answer. Please. Anyone? If you would like to stand up, and it's okay too, just to stretch, or we can go into the back of the room, and I'll pass the microphone to Yasko.
Well, I didn't. Was a very good lecture. I didn't want to first because my question is more basic. Something is. I think the question will relate to the psychology, behavior. But you answer what I had it before. I had that in my mind to ask the correlation between the three types of obsession to the case that you described. But you, in the end, you made the correlation, so I lost the question. But anyway, about the psychosphere, there's one moment in the obsession phase already that you said that they're so tightly And you said not almost. I imagine, I don't know if I imagine, you said some knots in this perispiritual interaction in the psychosphere. So is science able to, with this technology of today, or you envision something that during this heavy interaction, we able to see this, what I imagine, these knots, and that may later, even with a better technology, be correlated to the different quote-unquote sins that we have, either pride, envy, the bad one, selfishness, need to control, or something, so we'll be different color, different race, or something. Do you have some information about that?
What you're proposing, we don't have yet. This idea that, for instance, an individual under an influence that is so detrimental as to be on the second or third stage of obsession, that would be able to distinguish. However, there are two things. One is already happening, is already available, and another one is very promising. One is the psychological tools. You can actually, by analyzing that individual, if that individual would be willing to go through therapy, to go through analysis, you would be able to distinguish patterns of thoughts that usually were not there. So that would take into consideration in also interviewing members of the family. Because you have to actually establish what the individual used to be, and now as you interview the individual under this, let's say, influence, you would be able to have what we call a differential diagnosis. And the difference is exactly what is being added to that person. If it's a spiritist doctor, a spiritist physician, or a person at least with spiritualization, think that this influence is coming from. You can actually ask a battery of questions to the person when the person is inside the tube, being scanned. And then different areas of the brain will light up depending on what the person is thinking. Expensive light detector. But it has been shown that behaviors can be deduced from the MRI. Thought pattern being imposed. I don't have the right word because nobody has studied it and created a nomenclature for it. That's why I'm giving you so many different names. But there's another pattern of thought here superimposed on these persons, and they are actually happening at the same time. It's not that the person switches from one to the other back and forth. No, they happen simultaneously. All right? It's like if you have a string of twos, two, and then all of a sudden it's 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. What is it that you have added to those twos to make them to fives? So it's the 3. So when you do the difference, 5 minus 2 is what you get. The difference is what is being added. And then in this case, we would, in principle, okay, if we have a spiritualizing background, okay, spiritualization background, we would say, okay, this may be due to, if there is no physical trauma, of one form or another, it's coming from the other side. It's a spiritual affinity. And then what you're seeing is the manifestation of that second thought pattern, of that second sentience. It is very important, and I want to take the time here to say, sorry, it's going to be a little longer as an answer, but it's important for us to understand there are no two spirits in that body. No body has a spirit in it. No body has a spirit in it. We are associated. We, the spirit, we, the essence, have a perispirit, which is then in charge, associated with a physical body when we are reincarnated. You don't say that you're inside of this physical body. You're associated to it, because we don't have a better word for it. But to say it is inside is wrong, because it gives a wrong concept. It's an association. Exactly, yes. It's not like a piece of clothing. So when you have an obsession, you don't have to, and this is why we no longer use the word possession that we used to use. In Spiritism, we try to avoid that, because possession takes gives the impression that the spirit took the physical body of another spirit, which is not the case. So the two psychospheres are now so linked that the thoughts become mingled. When you eat a cake, you don't eat the flour and then the sugar and then the eggs and then the milk. You eat the cake. So that's it. When that person manifests physically through a physical body, it manifests thought patterns that are coming from two different sentiences. But because those two sentiences, those two intelligences, they agreed to handshake. They agreed and they remained bound to one another. And this is very important. Sorry. Yours next.
Yeah, so I have a general question dealing with the perispirit. I mean, first of all, I appreciate the way you explain it. As we know, a physical being, we understand the physical body. Then when you move the intermediate perispirit, then it's still having a little matter, a little physical, so we can have very quasi understanding, still obscured. But like you say, when you move to the inner part, which is the essence, which we absolutely don't understand it. So from Andre Lewis, I really try to understand both in health and disease. Julio, when he was going through his illnesses and physical body, his perispirit was also damaged. So I was really trying to relate to that. If the damage is a DNA at a DNA level, whether it's a deletion or some part of the DNA was affected, so that would be manifested in the next birth. So here again, we're talking at the perispirit level. Would you equate perispirit with a chromosome, a DNA? Because here we have a material thing. Then again, we have the immaterial information that's encoded within that DNA. What do you think of that?
Let me see if I understood your question in the first place. So that okay, you were asking me what is happening to the perispirit during a one reincarnation process. For instance, where there is a disease state of some kind or another, and is that going to affect the next physical body for the next reincarnation, depending on how the perispirit behaves? Is that what you are asking, basically?
Yeah, for us perceived perispirit, right? Is this thing the actual thing that's damaged, if we say it's a perispirit? Is it the chromosome that's damaged now? Because in Julio's case, when he's having, his, poisoning, he continued to have a throat infection, and he's becoming with the throat in the throat center, and he continued to manifest that. And then perispirit, from your explanation also, being the essence and matter together, would we equate perispirit with a chromosome or a DNA, so we can understand, in terms of
the passage.
Yeah.
Okay. If you gave me a lump of clay and asked me to mold a horse from it, with it, I would have to do that and then write underneath horse. You wouldn't be able to tell it was a horse, because I don't have the skills of a sculptor. I'm horrible at that. Same thing for certain types of drawing. Okay, you can do some technical drawings, but if you ask me to draw a flower and paint it, and that would look so alive that you would think that it's not even made of paper, I wouldn't be able to convey that. I don't have that artistic ability. Where do I want to get? What do I want to say with this? What do I want to convey? It means that the perispirit is going to create a physical body it knows how to create. It will not be able to create something that is worse, and it will definitely, because it's not stupid, okay? Actually, not because the perispirit is not stupid, because the essence who is in control of the perispirit is not stupid. The essence will want the best tool to improve itself. So the essence will try to build the best body possible, but it will never be able to build a body beyond its own capabilities of the moment. So get that thought now put it aside. Let's talk about something else quickly. Most diseases, diseases are actually of the perispirit. They are not of the physical body. The physical body manifests those diseases physically. To go into the details about how this can be is quite a long story, okay? I'll be happy to address it later if you want, but the point is, most diseases are in the perispirit. Those malformations are going to be, no malformations that are physical necessarily, okay? Malformations of character, for instance. Anything that is not, let's say, at its best, anything that is not at its most adaptable, most adequate, these are the malformations. A very general word. Those malformations are going to manifest themselves in a reincarnation process physically in one form or another. Having said that, I also want to say that nobody comes here diabetic, nobody comes here an alcoholic, nobody comes here with this or that. What happens is you come here with a propensity. An inclination, a higher probability of developing this, that, or the other. An individual, for instance, who passed away in the previous life because it drained his or her vital fluids from excessive smoking, will come to this life with lungs, with a genetic material that will predispose the individual to lung cancer or some other cancer that is related to smoking. But it doesn't mean the person will develop the disease. It will mean that the person has a higher likelihood, probability of developing it. But if that individual now comes to this new reincarnation life and changes lifestyle, changes habit, it will not develop it. Okay? Those serious cases where there are physical malformations, individuals have, for instance, certain trisomies, chromosome trisomies. They have 3 copies of one chromosome as opposed to 2, which usually lead to mental retardation or missing limbs and things like that. They are sometimes ways the individual developed for himself or herself to improve in this life. We have to be very careful. We cannot see an individual like that and immediately point the finger and label that person, you've done this and that in the previous life. It's not like that. If I now have nothing like that to atone for, I can choose some malformation, a physical malformation for my next life. If I feel confident that I can be successful with it, and in doing so, grow morally and intellectually more quickly. So, seeing someone with a disease or a state is not for us a form of, right or wrong or a direct line saying you did this before, that's why you have this now. There's no such a thing. This linear logic is extraordinarily dangerous because it would allow us to label individuals in certain ways and to actually segregate them. And that's not the case. Okay? That's not the case because think about it this way. If Jesus came as a very poor individual. Shouldn't he be king if he is the governor of the world, of this planet? Came as the son of a carpenter. So if you use that logic, that direct logic, he would be a poor spirit, right? So we have to be very careful. Like I said, diseases are in the perispirit. And sometimes, just to finish the thought, you may not finish this life cured of a disease, but the way you bear it cures your perispirit with it. So then for our next life, you will not suffer from something like that. Because here's one thing. The perispirit is being constantly renewed. Right now, you have renewed your perispirit. If you hated the lecture, if you didn't learn anything, the fact that you sat down here and you took the time to listen has given you a newer insight. You're no longer the same person. It's not about liking the lecture. It's not about understanding. It's the fact that just this activity itself, in being here, you have already changed your perispirit. But here's one problem. We cannot change our physical bodies. The physicality is bound by the genetic material once we come here. That genetic material is put together by the perispirit. But it's put together at the very beginning, and then we have to carry it to the end of this existence. And this is why the physicality is the only one that needs to perish, so that we can build a better body next time. The perispirit being able to be renewed constantly, even during a reincarnation process, doesn't need to die. This is just philosophical. It just doesn't need to die, because right now I'm already making my perispirit better. Right now. But my physicality, if it has something that is physical, I have to stay with it. Okay? If it's something that is medicine cannot cure yet, cannot alter yet, I have to stay with it to the end of this reincarnation process. But the balance, what I do, okay, forbearance, what I do with it will prepare me for the next one. And here's a catch. If you have a disease here, a physical manifestation of a disease, and let's say you get the cure, you may actually come next life, next reincarnation process, with the same one again. Because if you got the cure, but during the process you never really cured your perispirit, because you're not resigned to it, you were aggressive, you were belligerent, you were irritated with everything, with the doctor, with the nurses, with yourself, with life, with God and everything, you never really reformed yourself, you're going to go through it again, I promise you. We all have to be very careful with these things. So even when we get some temporary relief here in this reincarnation, that does not mean necessarily we have cured ourselves at the perispiritual level. And then we'll come back with the same, because like the defective part is over there. Next time I have to put another body, my mold is defective. I'm going to put another defective body. It's going to be slightly different. It can be of a different gender even. It can be from a different nationality and this and that. But we'll still have the same defect. Okay?
I'll try to be simple here. I valued the entire lecture. It's a great conceptual map for me to work with in understanding my relationships better. The part I would like you to elaborate more on, to me, was when the person realizes this is a detrimental situation and detaches, forgives, blesses, breaks the handshake. There's also the part I'm thinking that you said originally in the talk, that this is a lesson and or a test. So do those steps also come in with that changeover in the person?
Let me start from the end, because it's easier. Okay, no, because it's two great questions. It's only one question actually, but there are two main thoughts in it. One is when you say it's a lesson with a task. Just to let you know that, let's say it's a lesson. Do you think you have to go through it all the way to the end? No. Life is not planned. Life on the physical realm, there is no plan. Sometimes we use the word plan. It's okay, because sometimes we don't have another word or a better word for it. However, what you have to convince yourselves is that it's not that it's written in stone that if you don't do it, you're going to go to a bad place. The umbral, the lower zones. No, because there are so many ways we can evolve. So if you had scheduled, if you had some idea of doing this, for instance, but all of a sudden you had a deviation from it, you can still do good in this in this path. You don't have to have just that path. Okay? As long as it's a constructive path, it's a constructive path. You learn. So that's the first part. Now, when it comes to figuring out when it's time to intervene, let's put it this way. Unfortunately, I don't have another hour and a half. I'm going to be killing you. But tomorrow, it's exactly this. It's the answer to your question in full. It's a lecture on needs and wants. And basically what we have to be good at is defining if it's something that we need or if it's something that we want. If you need to go to work and there is no public transportation in the area you live in, you need a car. If you need a car, you need to have a driver's license. And you need insurance, this and that. But you don't need a sports car. That's what you want. So when you complain, no, because it's a very simple example, but that describes it exactly. And this, because I could have answered it more quickly by saying, they're using the platitude, know thyself. But I almost feel insulted when someone say that to me. So I don't want to do that to you. But that's exactly it. It's when you have to ask yourself, do I really need this? All right? Or is it because I want it? So sometimes, for instance, we put ourselves in situations where we create problems just because we want something and we think it's a need. And it's not that. And I'm not talking about possessions, okay? This is not it. This is not it. You see, we were talking about a necessity of moving from home to work because we all need to work. Work is how we progress in this life, physically. But then, to go there, you need a car. Fine, but you don't need a top-of-the-line car, or you don't need a sports car, or you don't need some car that costs $500,000, for instance. You need something that gives you security, safety, that can transport you from point A to point B and back without having to worry about it too much. All of these things. So it's this definition, where do you draw the line? And I cannot give you, or anyone here, but for that matter, a line where the line is, because each one of us has a different background, all right? Has a different background. For instance, if you're a magnet, you won't need a car or a sports car. You will need a jet plane. Because you need to move very fast, and you cannot be waiting in line at airports for every time you have to take a flight, right? So you need your own private jet plane. But that doesn't mean it's a luxury for that person. Perhaps by doing that, that person can guarantee thousands or tens of thousands of jobs for people by moving a little faster. So the cost of that plane compared to the social cost of laying off tens of thousands of people is staggering. It's staggering when you have to lay off so many people. The plane costs absolutely nothing in that case, or at least comparatively nothing. So needs and wants are very, very difficult to establish a general guideline. Each and every one of us has to sit down with our own conscience and say, okay, where is my selfishness getting into it? Where is my envy of the next individual getting into it? I just bought a nice new car, and just because my neighbor got one model ahead of mine, do I need now to go for the second, the one to top it? Things like that. But it's a great question, because we all have these issues. And we have things with things that are not material as well. We're not talking about houses or cars, but let's say if we want to have a family, friendships. Today, people are absolutely obsessed here, not with the spiritist idea. Obsessing is a fixated idea. Unfortunately, in English, they are both the same word. They are obsessed with the number of so-called friends they have on all these social media programs, right? They don't even realize that they're not friends. You've never seen the person. You barely talk. You text. You text what? 128 characters, 300 characters, 200 characters, and then someone goes, I like it. I don't like it. You know, and all of these things. And is this friendship? So these are things that the individual is talking about numbers instead of even realizing, it's not even about quality, but the person is not even realizing, what am I defining and what am I counting right now? The person counts as friends, but doesn't even understand what that word friend actually is. You can still use the social media and have true friends there, but then really 1 million, 100,000, 500,000, would you remember 500,000 names? Some people can. But, okay? So things like that. You have to know where to draw the line.
Hi, Julio. Thanks so much. This was a very great talk. Um, a lot of information, and I bet that we have to rewatch your talk to go to all this information more in detail. My question is, before my question, I like your explanation about perispiritual interaction. But I think to finalize, I'm wondering if you have a practical steps, how we can become aware of this interaction. Because it's beautiful here, but in the day-to-day, with all the things that cross our mind, we're not going to have time all the time to remember, okay, my thought, I'm going to connect to this person. So do you have any example that we can do in our day-to-day in a practical way to make sure that our interaction is more healthy than, the one unhealthy one? Thank you.
I'm going to answer with a modified platitude, and I'll explain a little bit. Live every single day as if it were your best, not last. What do I mean by that? Instead of trying to see what you did 10 years ago or reflect upon what you've done the past 10 years, it's too much. We can't accommodate, we don't have the time. And then that's what we do. We use this as an excuse, and we keep moving on day after day, and we live in automatic mode, in autopilot. Our brains are in neutral, in a manner of speaking, of course. And we wake up, we brush our teeth, we have our breakfast, we go to work, we commute, we do whatever we have to do at work, we finish. It's like, you know the Mount Everest syndrome? When, when you do something just because it's there and you have to do it. It's called the Mount Everest syndrome. It's exactly that. You wake up because you woke up, your body woke up. You have breakfast because you're hungry. Then you commute because you have to get to work. And when you're at work, you do whatever you have to do because it's there in front of you. And if you don't do, your boss comes in and complains that you haven't done it. And it might affect your paycheck. So everything is done automatically, in autopilot. So enjoy every moment. Wake up. Be grateful. You don't have to say a prayer that will take you an hour to finish. Just say, hey, I woke up. Wow. And I'm still in the physical realm. That's it. And move on. Today, you look at breakfast and say, okay, perhaps I have been eating too much. Today, I'm going to eat just a yogurt. But you stop to think about it. Or I think I deserve something more today. I'm going to have pancakes with some syrup on it. All right? So, but you move away from that routine, that constant humdrum that you go through in life, day in, day out. You do the commute. Look around. Oh my goodness! If you're driving, of course you cannot be sightseeing at the same time. I hope not. Okay, so I don't know. Put some nice music that is relaxing, or put a tape listen to a talk from Divaldo Franco, for instance, or some other talk, or like I said, some music or some other learn another language. Even if you don't think of going to visit that country, put something that makes your commute different. Get to work. Oh, and here's a point. This is the major one. What is it that you do? You don't have to tell me. Just do it. Do it properly, not because it's in front of you. Life, when God gave us this opportunity of being here, it did not give us one of those shelving units that says in and out. That's what we do. We take the things that are on the in and we just move it to the out. We don't even know it. We don't even read those documents. Like when people sign those dossiers that they pass around in the office and they don't even know what they're saying, or they send a card and the person signs the card, hey, enjoy your special day. Well, it was about someone who passed away and the card was for the widower or the widow. And because you don't even pay attention. Okay, I'm giving you ridiculously simple examples. I understand. Then I don't think you would be doing that. I hope not. But this is just to convey the impression that we go through things in life in autopilot. Okay? And then, hey, at the end of the day, if you have nothing to be thankful for, say, wow, that was a great day. The boss never showed his face in the office or her face in the office. So I didn't get yelled at today. Hey, that's amazing. That's a good day. You go home. Go home. You know, we all get home and we are really, really tired. We are. Put some music on. Say hello to those who live with you. And if you have no one, not even a pet, have some plant, or if nothing, do a crossword puzzle, get a jigsaw puzzle, do something. Don't just park yourself in front of the TV and let yourself just sink into that couch as if you had no brain whatsoever. There are moments when you can watch a movie. It's nice, but then you will enjoy that movie all the more because it's not something that you do on a regular basis. And you would be really paying attention. Really paying attention. What we are seeing today in our society is that because of the instant gratification that technology brings to us, there's nothing wrong with the technology, mind you. This is not the point. The point is that we get bored very quickly. And then we just sit back, we lay back, and we let things happen in front of us, and we don't pay attention anymore. We don't have the patience to interact with anything. I'm going to tell you a very quick story. I was having some difficulties with some of my students in the laboratory, and then one of the lady students came to me and said, "Professor, we are from a different..." She was very respectful, mind you. She was no way disrespectful. She said to me, "Professor, you have to understand we are from a different generation. We have no patience. Anything that takes more than 5 minutes for us is an eternity." I said, "Well, you are an eternal being. Welcome to eternity. Get to it." Okay? But yes, it's training. When we started reading, nobody read War and Peace as the first book. There was a reason why nobody gave a War and Peace book for 1,000-something pages for a kindergarten. Today we can, right? So why are we losing this ability of focusing our attention? And the worst part is that you might say, "Okay, I don't like reading." Fine, but you're telling me you don't like your life, because that's what we've been doing to our lives. So we have to be paying attention on a regular basis. You go visit a friend. Go visit a friend. Don't go visit a friend, sit down, and you are twitching on one side of the couch, the friend is twitching on the other side, or you're both watching TV, but you're not even talking. I mean, it's one thing when you're watching a game and you're both cheering, or one cheering against the other, but enjoy the moments. Live each day as if it's your best, as if you wanted to keep those memories forever, not as your last. Because that will give you a sense of irresponsibility, okay, of a playboy attitude. But as if it were best, as if you had to go back today to the spiritual realm, you would have that day to remember to remember this reincarnation. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. They know my face, and I can't hide it. The connection has been established that they know my face, and I want to ask a question. Thank you so much for everything, and thank you for your patience as well. I would like to make this last question, not because it's mine, but because of time. Here is what I'd like you to develop. Number one is the idea of sharing that you said very clearly for us to pay attention and to really understand this and take it to heart. And that it leads to another comment or question, which is in terms of the third person that we didn't see much. We only saw in one slide. This projection that we have, that we create, and we ultimately project onto others in that second person. I would like to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on how, directly or indirectly, or when we do it intentionally or unintentionally, that this connection that I have, for example, with you, will start influencing more Jeanette, who's right here next to us, that has no idea what we're going through, and how detrimental or beneficial that can be as well. I'll give you just a hint on where I'm trying to understand a little bit better and help others understand as well, is when you mention the negativity of influences happening to the third person, so it gets to me. You see what I'm saying? As well as when someone receives a benefit because of the good connection that I have established.
Okay. So basically, it's about how any interaction, perispiritual interaction, would affect a third person, a fourth person, so on and so forth. Everything that I said here today for two individuals, connection and interaction between two, is also true between one person and a group, or between two groups. Like I said, when that first person appeared at Inner Harbor and asked me for directions, that could have been a bus that had just stopped by, and like a whole group of people from a different country coming to Baltimore for the first time and wanting to know directions for a particular place. So I would have been interacting with all of them through the same single question. Okay, through the same single question. So, but I think Leo's question is more in the sense of when we are interacting, how this can actually spill over to a third, fourth person, which is not a positive or negative. I mean, we can focus on both of them, because I always like to give both so that we never we love to think about the things in a negative way. Do you know why? It's the same way that if you have you ever read Dante's Divine Comedy? I always say, I love the first book, Hell, because I understand it. I know what hell is. I know what gluttony is. I know what murder is. I know what a homicide is, what is to steal. I mean, it doesn't mean I have done it, this reincarnation, but I have done it. So this is why I know it. I have learned about it. And so it's delightful. Then you get to purgatory. It's okay. You interact with it a little bit, because those are the fleeting moments of happinesses that we have on this planet. So you kind of, but when you get to heaven, it's so dry and dull, because nobody knows what heaven really is. So how would you write about it? I mean, if he deserved any prize for it, he didn't get any prize in those days, right? But if he deserved any prize, it would be exactly for writing about heaven, not for writing about hell, because everybody here can write about hell. We all have a hellish of an experience in one form or another during our lives. So it's the same thing here. That's why we like to talk about negative things, because we understand them. We relate to them. Anyway, so the short answer is monkey see, monkey do. That's it. When you are in the office and you arrive on time, I'm going to give you the negative example first, because that's, as I said, is the easiest one to relate to. You arrive on time. You don't leave earlier. You try to do your best during the work day. You don't take two hours at the water fountain when you're thirsty. You don't use it as an excuse not to work. But then you see that everybody else does it. Chances are that you will actually start doing it too. It takes a very, very disciplined, I would call it an Emmanuel's mind. Discipline, discipline, discipline. If he would apologize for using his name in this, okay? Because it takes a very disciplined mind not to. You end up saying, wow, I work the same number of hours, I get paid the same way, but everybody is now slacking off, and I am killing myself, even doing somebody else's work because they are not doing, so it ends up becoming mine, because the boss sees that I'm a little more efficient than others. But then why am I doing this? So it's the monkey see, monkey do. You will begin seeing that negative influence, and if you're not that careful, you start doing it yourself. Worst part is that you have no excuse by saying, oh, I did it because the others were doing. You did it because you chose to. Sorry. No excuses here. In the same vein, if it's something that is positive, hey, that's what a good environment is. Why is it that we sometimes leave one job and we go for another, and we say, wow, this job, I don't even get as paid as much as in the other one, but I would never leave this, because your colleagues, your co-workers make such a nice environment that it more than compensates for that financial difference. Because you feel motivated. They don't criticize, they don't judge you, and not only that, they are always pushing you forward. They are always motivating you to do your best, because they also do the same. So the environment spills over positively on other individuals. And this is why I go back. I have to be very, but very, very, very careful in the Spiritist Center in particular, because this is where why the Spiritist Center? Because this is where we come to flee from the imperfect places. This should be the closest to perfection we can achieve here on earth. For us, Spiritists. I'm not putting down other beliefs, mind you. For us, Spiritists, this is our church, our temple, our mass hall, our synagogue, whatever it is that we want to call it. But this is where we come. This should be the environment we come, and we should feel the most welcome and the least judged. And because of this, the spirits who do not want us to progress, they are going, not necessarily each and every one of us especially, they just don't want people to progress, because misery loves company. They want you to be as miserable, we to be as miserable as they are. So they will be attacking us. They will be finding ways to make us become a negative influence on one another, so that we'll be doing their dirty job for them. Okay, I would like, you said it was the last one. Okay, so then I would say one thing then. When we speak of perispiritual interactions, we have to be particularly careful these days. And we will die, our physical bodies will die in this reincarnation before we see this world truly become a world of regeneration. This passage of Earth to a planet of regeneration started many centuries ago during the Industrial Revolution. Is happening, and technology has sped it up appreciably, but it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen in our lifetimes. Which means that we, as well as the other 21 billion people on the other side, on the spiritual realm, they are having their last chances to reincarnate here on planet Earth. If they don't do well, it's not that they are going to be exiled from the planet, because that means that some external force is going to push them aside. They will not find themselves comfortable here anymore, because the bulk will be at least inclined to do good, and they are not. Which means that right now there's a huge instability, psychic instability, psychological instability in the physical realm and in the spiritual realm. Let's say around planet Earth, whether we talk about reincarnates or discarnates, it doesn't matter. We are all in turmoil, because most of us, I'm sorry to say, it is the truth, most of us do not want to reform ourselves. And we don't want to reform ourselves, and we don't want others to reform themselves, because if they do, a taller tree will start shadowing us. In other words, we will start being minority. So there is a lot of influence, more than ever. When when the majority was less likely to do good things, there was much less pressure from the bulk. Now, those people are becoming minority, because the planet is regenerating. Most of us are trying to do something to improve ourselves. So they are desperate. Divaldo, I'm one of the atoms in the speck of dust. Okay? If Francisco Xavier once considered himself the tick on the dog or something like that, it was like I am one of the atoms on that tick, let's put it this way. But so when I'm quoting Divaldo Franco, I'm quoting Raul Teixeira, I'm quoting Haroldo Dutra. These individuals who study a lot more, who give lectures left and right, I mean, they're touring the world, giving lectures. The individuals who, especially when we talk about Divaldo, and we can even mention Francisco Xavier that passed away, like that can see the other side, that can understand the other side. I cannot see. I don't see, I don't cycle. I'm not a medium, okay, an extensive medium. I'm a medium like everybody's a medium, in the sense that I can talk to my guardian angel, my protecting spirit, let's put it this way. They are in turmoil on the other side, the same way that we are very, very disorganized here. So the interactions have a tendency to be negative and tendency to be also very aggressive, because time is running out for all of us. We are the workers of the last hour. And I'm going to end with this, because the workers of the last hour got paid for the full day, in a way that to give you the hope, a message of hope. Being the workers of the last hour is not